Hello, everyone. This is Daniel Sierra, Vice President for Policy, Strategy, and Market Outreach for Exomad. And we're going to continue today the series of podcast episodes that we have started bringing to the market. And together with me today, we have Adrian Wons, who is the CEO of the company Senken. Adrian, pleasure to have you today.
Hey, thanks for the invite, and I'm happy that I can join your podcast. I'm a fan of podcasting, especially for this topic, and super excited what we're going to talk about today.
Glad to hear. I'm also excited as well. And let's go straight to business. I'm a lawyer by training, and I was very struck in your webpage to read the very striking text that carbon credits are not marketing claims, but they are legal claims. So I would love if you can share with our audience a little bit more about Senken and what brought you to make that very robust statement.
Fantastic. I love that I'm here with a lawyer because I'm the opposite. I'm an engineer, and I think an engineer and a lawyer is always a really good combination. So fantastic. So what brought me to carbon market? So as I said, I'm an engineer, come from the wind energy space. And after some different kind of jobs in consulting and research, I actually had a research project in South Africa around regenerative agriculture and asked farmers what would incentivize them to switch to regenerative agriculture. And they all said, "Hey, money, obviously. Money would make me switch." Um, and I was like, "Where's the money coming from?" And then they said, "Hey, it could be development banks, but it could also be carbon markets." That was like 5 years ago, but they said they're not they're not working the way we need them to, from a different kind of perspective. We can go get into that later. But yeah, I, naive that I am, wanted to just fly back to Germany from South Africa, and then the COVID variant Omicron, which originated, or like they found it in South Africa, made all the flights stop, so you couldn't fly back to
Wow,
Germany. What you do, you start a startup, right? If you're
of
stuck.
course.
So I started Senken at that point, and that was like 5 years ago. And then fast forward, what we're doing now is we, on one hand, partner with amazing companies like yours, Exomad Green, and on the other hand, with corporates around the world, helping these two parties to come together, right? What we do is we help big corporates set up their strategy around credits and carbon removal. So what do I have to buy and when do I have to buy and what makes sense maybe for my industry. And then on the next, we figure out, okay, which projects should I actually support? Which ones are actually delivering impact? And that all of that can be managed through our platform. And yeah, working with big corporates, like for instance, Deutsche Telekom or Vodafone or Vorwerk or like also banks, like the second biggest German bank, DZ Bank, and so on and so forth. And yeah, that's why we have so much interaction with Exomad Green.
Thank you very much to hear that. And we're also very happy to engage with Senken. And as you're mentioning, I think that it is very important in the space that we are, that is a space based on trust. But as you know, the ex-president of the United States said, trust but verify. And I really like that logic that we're not in a philanthropic market. We're not in a um, we're not it's always an interesting discussion what the word voluntary in the voluntary carbon market is, because definitely it is voluntary, but that does not mean that it needs to be low quality or not accurate, right? Voluntary, same as watchmaking. You buy a watch because you voluntarily buy a watch, but you can be a great watchmaker and the watch industry is just very precise and incredible. So I do think that this shift from philanthropy, from sustainability claims in general to accurate science based certification, and therefore having the ability to make a legal claim with an accurate and robustly certified credit allows you to really move ahead into climate action to the companies that you're helping. So I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit more about the methodology that you guys use at Senken in order to assess the different carbon credits that then you help your clients to navigate the procurement process.
Yeah. So just coming back to the point before we get a little bit deeper into that, that carbon credits are not a marketing claim, they're a legal claim. Is I
Yes.
think carbon markets had a massive hype around 220, 221, and it was mainly based on a marketing claim that was called climate neutral. And I mean, I'm not sure about your side, but in Germany, almost every second product in the supermarket had a climate neutral badge.
Oh, wow.
You couldn't find out why, but they had a climate neutral badge. They made a marketing claim. And a lot of that obviously was based on carbon credits. But the consumers never knew what kind of carbon credits. So they just took it at face value and said like, yeah, I mean, there was some money that went into credits, I guess. But you don't even know what is climate neutral. Is like, I don't know, that company carbon neutral? Is that product carbon neutral? You had no clue. And that was basically a point where, especially in Europe, they started and looking like, if we look at it from a consumer protection point of view, and consumer protection law, this is not protecting consumers. They don't know what they're buying, but they get a claim, a marketing claim based on a carbon credit. And that's when a couple of years the European Commission actually started and say that we can't let that happen. And it was not only climate neutral, it was also like eco-friendly and so on and so forth. But climate neutral was the biggest one. There was a big legal case in Germany that a company lost with their kind of climate neutral labels. And then the European Commission actually came out with the Empowering Consumer Directive, EMCO, which all the European countries have to translate into law this year, and then they're all effective from September this year on. So you're still allowed to make claims, but now you properly have to prove how you got to this claim, and your carbon credits need to have the impact, right? If you say, I got to this and this because there were 1,000 tons that were sequestered out of the atmosphere, and that's the reason I make this claim, then this project has to live up to that promise and to that kind of performance. And if not, again, you could be part of a legal case. And that's the moment carbon credits are not only a marketing claim anymore, they're a legal claim. So
Totally.
I think we have to have that kind of detail and emphasis on the performance of that carbon asset. Otherwise, we have to fear legal consequences. And I think this is a big step up on the journey, I would say, for carbon credits. And I think a lot of people are not really aware that there are these laws slowly coming out.
Totally. No, and I was really struck by the stat that you mentioned to me that of the very high rate of projects that you rate that are not having the climate impact that they are claiming to have, and it is a rate very close to 90%. If you can tell us a little bit about more and the methodology that you use to assess these projects, that would be great.
Yeah, totally. So basically, we've started creating this methodology like 2.5 years ago. In the beginning, we were looking with our own scientists on just project by project, and then we were like, okay, this will not make us, or it doesn't enable us to also compare projects properly. So we started creating our own indicator, which is the Sustainability Integrity Index. And the Sustainability Integrity Index basically checks a project across 5 different pillars. And these kind of pillars, you will see in a second, they are then scored and they have different data points. So across all these 5 pillars, we have a little bit more than 600 data points. And there are some of the pillars that are quite, I would say, rich in data, like for instance, carbon integrity is almost like 200 data points of the 600. And then there are others that are a little bit less in depth, just by the nature of it. But basically these 5 pillars, and every project that we look at goes through all these pillars, and every project that we actually work with and that we work with corporates had a score of 80 or more, and our score goes all the way to 100. As you said, it's around, I'm not sure what the exact number is, but like 5 to 10% at the moment that of the projects we looked at that actually made it. So you see still, it gets better, but still there's a high amount of projects that just are not up to scratch. I have to say and admit that we have a really high bar, because that's, I think, what companies value. But
Yeah.
just to say that.
And
Um,
we need to have a high bar in order for carbon credits not to be a marketing claim, but a legal claim. If we don't have a high bar, then we're doing a disservice to climate action.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why companies come to us. I think there were also companies before that we talked to and they just had a different understanding, and they'll just say, sorry, then we can't work with each other. That's fine. There are other providers out there, but then we're probably not the right one. But yeah,
Totally.
coming back to these 5 pillars, so the first one is just like fundamental project integrity. So we just look, for instance, hey, is it on a registry? Does it, for instance, have CPP, a CCP label? Is there no double counting, regulatory non-compliance, and so on? Here, basically, it needs to score almost 100%, otherwise it will just directly have red flags and will fall out. Then we have the biggest one is the carbon integrity. So this is like things like we look at the baselines, additionality, permanence, leakage, and so on. So all the classic things you know about when you think about, hey, is this like a really good high quality project from a carbon perspective? And these obviously they differ from project type to project type, right? So we have that for all the different pathways that we're supporting at Senken, which is like all the tech-based removal and then a couple of nature-based avoidance, like for instance improved forest management. But we're not working with any tech-based avoidance like renewable energy or cook stoves, just because the majority would just fail our, for instance, additionality tests anyways. So that's the reason we're not even making the effort. Otherwise, we would have to have additional scientists in house. Then the third one is beyond carbon. So it's basically all the things around biodiversity, social, and other sustainable development goals. Which is also a thing that most of the rating agencies, because really often we get asked like, hey, how do you differ to a rating agency? I think rating agency mostly look at the second one, the carbon integrity, and then they have a couple of things shown for social. I think some are maybe doing more, like for instance Calix, but most of them, they just show, okay, what SDGs. We go a little bit deeper on that, and that is exactly, for instance, in the third pillar, which is beyond carbon. And then pillar 4 and 5 are just going to bring together is all around digital MRV and our reporting process. So there we look into like, hey, all the projects that we work with, they need to have at least one external digital MRV provider, because we think just this gives us another layer of depth for data, but also another independent verifier. And yeah, then we go through all these 5 pillars, and in the end we have a score for each pillar, and the final score just needs to be higher than 80 out of 100. Obviously, there are a couple of data points that are just immediately disqualifiers, obviously.
Big red flags. And actually, I am very happy to report that Exomad Green is one of those projects that Senken has assessed, and it has passed your very thorough methodology. So I would love to ask you, what are the things from Exomad that your team saw that strike you the most, and what can you tell us from your perspective about the project and why you made the assessment you made?
Yeah, totally. So I definitely, because I'm just looking into it, so it's one of the top 3 projects that we ever rated. So first of all, that's obviously great. But then there are a couple of things looking at it. So one thing is obviously we're looking at the actual biochar product that is coming out. We obviously want it to be stable, and I think the machinery that Exomad Green is using is on a really high scale, and we can trust the permanence of the biochar that is actually coming out there. So this is obviously one big thing. Then the really important thing for us is the deliverability and the scalability of the project itself. So we know, okay, permanent removal is still quite limited. I mean, obviously there are a lot of offtakes, but from how many credits are actually delivered, Exomad obviously for the biochar side makes a big share of it, right? I mean, we worked on a couple of customers together, and we already had some big deliveries already last year, right? So I think this is something that is really, really important, and the trust in that the credits are actually coming. And then a third thing that is maybe also different to a lot of the other projects that we're seeing is how is the biochar, the actual product, used in the end, right? A lot of especially European projects, they need to sell these assets, right? They need to sell the biochar itself, otherwise the the project is just not economically viable. And I think this is obviously something that is quite interesting here in our Beyond Carbon perspective, where Exomad has just a way higher score than a lot of other biochar projects, because the biochar is actually distributed to local farmers in the area. And that's, we see that makes quite a difference on the score on that side.
It allows for faster scale and control. And those are key elements in order to have consistent, predictable operations, which I agree with you. It's one of the key advantages of Exomad. And I'm very happy to hear that it's a top 3 in the top 3 of the projects you guys have assessed. That's very good news.
Definitely. And then obviously, I mean, questions that we also got from a couple of customers before is like around the feedstock sourcing, because people were like, okay, wow, this is a big amount of carbon credits that is coming from. Like, how is the feedstock being sourced? And I think also the transparency on the data there and the insights we get from your side, helped us also to convey that kind of insight and took that kind of concern from corporates that we're working with.
Yeah, we're very proud of our MRV process and the ability to trace the feedstock from origin to end-site application. And I believe that we're able to, to show to any actor how this traceability is done, and definitely one of the key quality aspects of the Exomad credits. So in the interest of time, Adrian, I would like to move to our final part
we're
of the
already at 20 minutes. Yeah,
yes,
it's quick talking to you.
Exactly. That's why I say let's move, not to bore our audience, but I mean, clearly not by hearing from you, because everything, it's really, really interesting. Just in the interest of time, to try to finish in the next 7 minutes max. Let's talk about the aviation industry and the need in the aviation industry for neutralization, or the need for carbon removal credits in the aviation industry, net zero plans. And I think that, it's an incredibly interesting topic. And I'm happy to announce, and here we can announce together, that Exomad and Senken signed a multi-year offtake agreement of 105,000 credits that are going to be delivered for the aviation industry of Senken's clients. So I would love to hear a little bit more, what you think about that, and tell us your general thoughts on this contract and of the aviation industry in general in the net zero context.
Yeah. So if you go a little bit deeper on the aviation industry, because I mean, obviously we're super happy that this deal worked out, and I think the aviation industry is an industry that has completely different challenges to other industries. Look, because I mean, there's some industries, like for instance telecommunication or others, where we can just see, okay, they will be able to reduce their footprint by 90%, maybe even 95%. It just Deutsche Telekom announced they reduced it in scope 1 and 2 by 94%, and then for the last 6% we supported them with the carbon removal. But aviation, we will never hear these kind of success stories. So the sector as such will not go away. We even see more so that it will grow. And obviously we can have more efficient planes and so on, but we will never get to 90%. We can just be honest about that. So what are the different levers that we have then? And for me, obviously, there's a big thing that we always hear about, and this is sustainable aviation fuel, right? But to be honest, from my perspective, I hear about it already for 7 years, and very little has changed.
A bit more than 7 years. Yeah.
Probably more, but I think the change we had over the 7 years is sad, right? Because let's think about it. 7 years ago, there was no biochar credit.
Totally.
And a whole industry got created that is already bigger than the SAF industry. So I'm just looking at that in a trajectory. SAF doesn't look like it will fulfill the whole job of decarbonizing the aviation industry. It maybe still will have a part, but at this point, I just can't see it. So what is the other option? The other option is figuring out, okay, how can I use other means in order to draw down the CO2 again? And obviously here we see permanent removal being really interesting in that industry. And I think there are already studies out there where people are comparing, does it even make sense to scale up SAF industry, sustainable aviation fuel industry, or should we rather spend that money on, I don't know, direct air capture, biochar, etc.? Because in the end it will be cheaper anyways. So I think it's really interesting industry, especially for permanent removal.
Totally. And I think the key there is that word permanent removal, because once you consider that it is indeed high quality, accurate, and permanent, so you can use the like for like principle of neutralization of the fossil fuel emissions of the aviation industry, then you can say it is just an economic discussion. It is no longer a technical discussion. It is what is cheaper to reduce with SAF or to neutralize with CDR. And I do think that we can make the claim that it is permanent CDR, that the robustness of the certification process is sufficient for us to consider that we have high quality carbon removal credits, permanent carbon removal credits, and therefore it's just a matter of cost benefit and an economic race instead of a technical race, which I think is good.
Exactly. I think we all somehow we shouldn't look at it from, or we always should look at it from an economic point of view rather than from, I don't know, political or whatever, right? Because then we're not getting anywhere, and we maybe also funnel money to the wrong activities that are maybe needed somewhere else to make it even more economic, right? If I, for
Totally.
instance, think about, okay, we talk about biochar, but even if we think of also on others, right? I think biochar is already quite developed, and that's the reason it's so interesting. But obviously, we need more options out there, and there are other options that are not as developed. There's like direct air capture also. If we would funnel more money into this area rather than some,
Totally.
yeah. But I'm a big believer of like look at it from an economical point of view. Otherwise, we will also lose trust and so on in the whole
Yeah.
decarbonization as such.
Yeah, and the great thing is that you can be agnostic about the solution. It might be that
Yep.
SAF actually wins in the race for the abatement cost, and they can actually deliver, and it actually makes more sense for airlines to go with SAF. But then let's see. That's not the case right now. It's difficult to see how that can be the case in the future. But if it is the case, then so be it. Let's just allow for an agnostic scientific discussion to take place that allows you to be able to choose the cheaper option of the same climate impact that you're looking for.
Exactly. Let's talk about scientific. Let's talk about Corsia.
Corsia, very very interesting. I think the ambition of Corsia, was very high, very robust, but it was set up in 2016, and the world is very different in 2016 from
2016.
2026. No,
Crazy, huh?
yeah,
10 years.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I think on one hand, it's an amazing, or like in the times we are at with the carbon markets, I think it's a really important demand driver, and we need it especially to get more investments because you have a certain kind of ceiling for prices, floor for prices, that also makes it interesting for investors to invest. But if you look at the quality perspective, what kind of credits are allowed to be in there, then I think the bar is way too low. I mean, it's not even just a little bit below our bar. It's like there's no bar. It feels like, right?
yeah,
Because I think if we look at ratings, I saw that from Calix, and they looked at the average rating of all the projects they rated, and then of all the projects that are eligible for CORSIA, and it's almost the same distribution. So we see
yeah,
there is no raised bar on a quality perspective. And then I also think the type, like what type of credits you want to bring in. Obviously, if the bar is low, you go for the cheapest credits. It's a compliance market, and a compliance
of course,
market, obviously, it's like there's someone in procurement that just wants to make the best for the company, and their goal
of course.
is to spend the least amount of money. And if the bar is not low, obviously you go for the cheapest avoidance credit that is eligible for it. Which,
It's the competent
if
thing
it's
to
more
do.
in scientific, there's not that much in scientific. If we say for the next 10 years, that's completely fine.
Totally. And what I wish the Corsia framework could evolve to into the future is a framework that separates targets between carbon reduction credits and carbon removal credits. And you can perfectly have a breakdown of 90% of the required credits being carbon reduction credits, but at least have this similar to a 90-10, 80-20 you can start with 95% breakdown of reduction and removal rates. But I do think that it's very important to separate, as you are mentioning, the kind of grade and to also enhance the possibility with these demand signals for carbon removal crates that are
100%.
more that
And
are
we have a
cost effective.
guideline, right? We
Yeah,
could just use the Oxford principles and say
of
like,
course.
okay, this is basically the journey towards net zero. And I think for me, it sounds easy.
It sounds easy, but yeah, I think
No, no, it's not.
the coordination problem is tough. This
Yeah.
is a government led initiative, so I'm not pessimistic in the sense that it cannot happen, but I do think that it will take time and it will take the whole industry, and eventually it has to go to a societal level, that it is societies, organized societies, that are pushing for this, for accurate scientific climate action. And I do believe that CDR will be able to play a role, in Corsia, but broadly in the policy debate for neutralization, if we have more partners and more societal support for this policy, for these targets.
I mean, that sounds like a perfect sentence to end our podcast with.
I agree, and it's just 31 minutes, so we went 10 minutes beyond what we thought we were going to do, but I'm very happy to have had this conversation with you, Adrian. I hope our audience also found it interesting, and yeah, I don't know if any last word, but thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for hosting and talk soon. I enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you very much, and bye bye everyone. Hope you enjoyed it.